You've never saved anyone. Don't think you can keep the clinic your father built. My father said that in front of the entire staff, and in front of the patients who were still applauding the 25 years of Whitmore Clinic. That night, my name disappeared from the partnership. 3 days later, I was the one requesting an investigation into my own father's clinic. And that is the story of Claire Whitmore. People often say, in a family, you don't need paperwork. But what if it's your own family that uses paperwork to push you out? Where are you listening to this story from? A quiet kitchen in Georgia? A couch in Illinois? Or from a place where you once had to stay silent to keep the peace? I'm Lisa. Before I tell you what happened after that sentence, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever been made smaller inside your own family, stay until the end. That night's celebration took place in the main lobby of the clinic, where I grew up among the smell of disinfectant and the steady beep of blood pressure monitors. Silver and blue balloons lined the ceiling. A large banner reading 25 years of caring for our community hung behind the podium. I stood to my father's left, half a step behind him, exactly where I had stood for years, close enough to support, far enough to be unseen. When he raised his glass to thank the team, the applause rolled like waves. He spoke about sacrifice, about late-night shifts, about the community that had trusted Whitmore Clinic for a quarter of a century. Then his tone shifted to restructuring for streamlined management. My brother Michael stepped forward with a stack of documents, his smile as neat as every board meeting before. Claire will no longer participate in the partnership, he said calmly. She is not involved in clinical operations. A few staff members looked at me. Most avoided my eyes. Someone cleared their throat. My father didn't look at me. He simply nodded as if everything had been agreed upon in advance. I didn't argue immediately. I walked to the registration table in the back where the new bylaws had been placed. The bold line at the bottom stopped me. Voting rights transferred under a power of attorney signed 2 years earlier, the document I had signed so my father could handle a short-term loan during the pandemic. I picked up the copy and turned back toward them. "Who signed for me?" I asked, loud enough for the room to hear. No one answered. Michael said softly, "You already authorized it." I looked at my scanned signature inserted into an appendix I had never seen. The ink was fresh. I placed the documents back on the table. I didn't throw them. I didn't fold them. I simply set them down. That night, after everyone left and the hallway lights dimmed, I opened the internal billing system from the small office at the back of the clinic. A data sheet was still open, not yet cleared, and the numbers on it, if anyone outside the family saw them, would not just be a story about a name removed from a contract. I pulled my chair closer and logged into the internal billing system with my old credentials. The password hadn't been changed. The blue screen of the Medicare claims portal loaded slowly, its cold light reflecting in the glass behind me. 2:17 a.m. glowed in the corner of the screen. I filtered the data by CPT codes. My heartbeat kept pace with the rows of numbers scrolling down. 15-minute visits recorded as 40 minutes. Simple follow-ups billed at higher complexity levels. I opened each file, comparing check-in times with documented duration. Some were doubled, some tripled. I switched to remote consultation. The list was longer than I expected. Many virtual visits had no attached audio file, no detailed notes, just a line confirming completion. I clicked one at random. The clinical notes section was half empty. I didn't rush. I downloaded the data and built a comparison sheet. Every discrepancy I highlighted in yellow. Within 10 minutes, the screen was filled with warning blocks. The printer in the corner began its steady rhythm. I printed 38 files with irregularities and stacked them neatly. The paper was still warm in my hands, the scent of fresh ink mixed with cold coffee on the desk. Outside, the parking lot was empty. The Whitmore Clinic sign still glowed, its white light washing over the concrete like any other night. Nothing suggested anything inside had shifted off its axis. I sat still for a few seconds, staring at the summary total at the bottom of the spreadsheet. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in discrepancies in less than a year. Not a typo. Not a single mistake. If an official audit happened, this file would be the first thing requested. And if federal insurance authorities saw these lines, the story would not stop at partnership. I gathered the stack of papers and placed them in my briefcase. The sky was beginning to pale in the east. I knew that in the morning I would set these papers on the breakfast table, where my family still sat every day as if nothing had shifted. I drove home as the sun began to rise. The stack of files rested in the passenger seat, the edges brushing softly whenever I turned. I didn't turn on the radio. The only sound in my head was the printer from earlier. In the garage, I sat for a few minutes before going inside. My clinic ID badge was still in the back seat, light blue lanyard with the Whitmore Clinic logo embossed. I picked it up. The plastic felt cold. 8 years ago, after I earned my CPA license, my father stood outside the clinic and placed his hand on my shoulder. "You keep this family safe," he had said. I thought he meant taxes, audits, numbers without errors. I never thought it would mean protecting the family from itself. I set the badge down on the kitchen table. The plastic touched wood with a sharp sound in the quiet house. I didn't throw it away. I simply removed it from my pocket like a habit interrupted mid-motion. I opened my laptop and searched an old contact list. Not a lawyer. A lawyer would ask me who I wanted to protect. I needed someone who would ask what the data said. Daniel Mercer's name appeared, an independent auditor who had worked with me on an internal investigation for another clinic in Charlotte. I called before I could change my mind. "Daniel, I need you to look at some files," I said when he answered. I didn't explain at length. I sent sample files through a secure channel. He was quiet for a few seconds, then asked, "Is this Medicare related?" "Yes." "Claire, if what I'm seeing is accurate, this isn't just an accounting error." I looked out the window. Morning light spread across the backyard. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I know." The call ended. I sat still, my hand resting on the table. In the living room, the wall clock ticked steadily like any other morning. But from that moment on, I understood something clearly. Keeping a family safe doesn't always mean shielding them from pain. 5:42 a.m., I pressed send. The email was short, without emotion. Request to initiate an immediate internal audit, pause all unreviewed claims, and preserve all records related to Medicare for the past 12 months. I sent it to my father, to Michael, and to the entire board. No lengthy explanation, just data and a request for action. My phone vibrated almost instantly. Michael texted first. "You're destroying the family legacy." I read it and didn't reply. A minute later, my mother called. Her voice wasn't loud, but sharp. "What are you doing, Claire? You're bringing outsiders in to scrutinize us? Our family has never done anything wrong. You're being disloyal." I placed the phone on the table and looked at the laptop screen still open. The last line of my email read, "Compliance review to begin immediately. No accusations, just process. When the truth walks into a room, it doesn't ask whose family." Michael called again. I answered this time. "Do you know what you're doing?" he asked, voice low but tight. "If this gets out, we'll lose patients' trust." "Trust doesn't come from closing your eyes," I said evenly. "An internal audit isn't a sentence, it's an opportunity." He was silent for a few seconds, then hung up. I opened the email again and reread every line. No hostility, No accusations, just a request for transparency. Around 11 a.m., the clinic received an overnight envelope from the Medicare administrative contractor, a letter requesting clarification on several claims within 14 business days. Michael forwarded the scanned copy to me with a short subject line. Satisfied now? I looked at the bold deadline in the letter. 14 days. Everything had just moved up a level no one in my family could pretend not to see. I spent the afternoon reviewing vendor contracts. Most were routine: equipment, software, maintenance. But in a subfolder, I found a PDF labeled simply Strategic Partnership, Blue River Diagnostics. I opened it. Clause 4 stated that the clinic would recommend advanced diagnostic testing for eligible patients. In return, Blue River would provide a quarterly management consulting fee. It didn't explicitly say commission, but the attached appendix showed payments calculated based on the number of tests referred. I scrolled to the bottom. Michael's signature was there. I checked financial reports. In the last 3 quarters, the consulting fee had nearly doubled, aligning with a spike in advanced testing volume in patient records. I didn't close the file. I printed the contract and walked directly to Michael's office. The door was closed, blinds half drawn. He was looking at his screen when I placed the contract on his desk. "What is this?" I asked. He glanced at it and leaned back. "Strategic partnership. Blue River provides faster service. Patients benefit." "And the fee tied to test volume?" He shrugged. "That's how they offset support costs. Everyone does it." The sentence landed between us, cold as the glass tabletop. "You know this could be considered a kickback, right?" I asked. "Claire," he leaned forward, "don't be naive. If we don't optimize, this clinic won't survive." Dad agreed. I paused. "He knows everything?" "He didn't ask for details, and he trusts me." I left without another word. In the hallway, the next patient's call bell rang as usual. The clinic was still running. Patients still waited. The Whitmore name still hung neatly outside the door. But now I knew, if that contract came to light, this would not just be about billing codes. And my father's silence was no longer accidental. The board meeting was held that same evening in the glass conference room on the second floor of the clinic. Below us, a few late patients still waited. Fluorescent light reflected off the long table where my father sat at the head, as he had for 25 years. I placed a folder in front of each member. Billing discrepancies, the Blue River contract, the Medicare clarification letter. No slides, no polished charts, just paper. "I'm going to get straight to the point," I said. "We have upcoding. We have remote consultations with missing documentation, and we have a contract that could be considered a kickback." Michael immediately cut in. "You're using unnecessarily loaded words. This is standard operational practice." "I reviewed 38 sample files," I replied, opening the first page. "A 15-minute visit was recorded as 40 minutes, billed at a higher level. If we're audited, this is the first thing they'll see." One board member shifted in his seat. Michael tried to speak again, but I raised my hand without raising my voice. "Let me finish." My father sat still, his hands clasped together on the table. He looked at the numbers in front of him, not at me. There are moments when a father is no longer a father. He is only the one who signs. "I propose we self-report," I said slowly. "Voluntary disclosure. Proactively review and repay if necessary." Michael let out a short laugh. "You want to hand us over on a silver platter?" "If we don't report it ourselves, I will." The room fell silent for a few seconds. I pulled a formal disclosure request from my folder, already prepared to submit to the insurer. I signed at the bottom of the page. Then I opened my laptop, accessed the billing system, and issued a request to pause all new claims until the internal review was completed. The freeze order appeared on the screen immediately. My father finally spoke, his voice rough. "Claire, do you understand what this will do to us?" I looked at him. "I understand what will happen if we don't." 3 days after the meeting, an email from Medicare officially announced a comprehensive review. It was no longer a single clarification request. This time, it was a long list of files requiring additional documentation, each with clear deadlines. The accounting department had to stop processing claims tied to the questioned service codes. Cash flow slowed almost immediately. The clinic remained open, but the rhythm changed. Some advanced testing services were temporarily suspended pending review of the Blue River contract. The receptionist had to explain to patients why they needed to return later. I walked past the waiting area and heard the quiet but heavy questions. "What's going on? Is the clinic okay?" I didn't answer for anyone. I only required that everything be documented properly. A week later, my father received a summons from the state medical board. The hearing was scheduled for the end of the month. I saw the envelope on his desk when I stepped into his office. He was sitting there, white coat still on, but his hands rested motionless on the table. "Are you satisfied now?" he asked without looking at me. "Everything is still under review," I said. He looked up. The open anger from the anniversary night was gone. Only exhaustion remained. "You chose the law, not me." He didn't raise his voice, but the sentence hung between us like a wall. I stood still. Some answers, if spoken, only make things worse. I didn't say I chose the clinic. I didn't say I chose the patients. I didn't say I did this because he once told me to keep the family safe. I just looked at him for a few seconds, then turned away. In the hallway, the Whitmore Clinic sign was still lit, but for the first time in years, I understood that the name on the wall no longer made me tremble at the thought of losing it. The medical board's decision arrived on a rainy afternoon. 6-month suspension. Not permanent, not a full revocation, but enough for everyone to understand the clinic had crossed a line. My father read the decision in silence. He didn't argue. He didn't request an immediate appeal. He folded the paper, set it down on the desk, and walked out of the room. For the first time in years, his white coat hung untouched on the hook. Michael submitted his resignation from the financial oversight role before the review was fully concluded. There was no press release, no long explanation, just a single line in the meeting minutes. Restructuring of executive responsibilities. The clinic had to repay the confirmed improper amounts. The final number wasn't small. We cut non-essential expenses, renegotiated contracts, and paused expansion of the second location. Decisions no one wanted to make, but had to. The board kept me on in the role of independent financial oversight, dual signature authority on all major claims, full review authority over partner contracts. The work I had once done in the shadows was now written into the bylaws. Late that afternoon, after the last employee left, I sat alone in the waiting room. The chairs were lined up neatly, magazines straightened on the table. The Whitmore Clinic nameplate still hung on the glass door, light reflecting off the metal letters. I looked at the name longer than usual. It was no longer something that made me proud the way it did when I was a child. It was no longer a burden that made me afraid to defy my father. It was just a name and a responsibility. Inside, the system had been cleaned piece by piece. Outside, my family was no longer the same. Justice came, but it did not bring complete relief. 6 months passed faster than I expected. The billing system was rewritten line by line. Every service code now had an attached checklist. Every remote consultation required properly archived recordings. There were no more gray areas explained away by habit. I hired an independent compliance officer, someone who did not carry the Whitmore name. The compliance department had its own glass office, clear policies posted on the wall, and an internal hotline for anonymous reporting if needed. In weekly meetings, I didn't talk about family reputation. I talked about transparency. Cash flow stabilized slowly. Lower than before, but clean. The board no longer argued about whether to optimize. We talked about risk and responsibility. My father returned to the clinic after the suspension. He put his white coat back on, moved a little slower than before. He worked as usual, seeing patients, writing notes, leaving on time. He never mentioned that board meeting, never mentioned voluntary disclosure, and he never said, "Thank you." One morning, I saw him standing in front of the new compliance policy posted in the hallway. He looked at it for a few seconds, then turned away when he noticed me. No comment, just a slight nod. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my office and removed my ID badge from around my neck. The woman in the mirror no longer looked like the one who had sat silently at the 25th anniversary celebration, letting her name be erased from the partnership. My gaze was steadier. My shoulders no longer tightened when someone raised their voice. I no longer waited for validation to know I had done the right thing. The clinic still carried the Whitmore name, but the way it operated had changed. And so had I. I kept the clinic, but Sunday dinners were no longer the same. Small stories about patients or expansion plans were no longer mentioned at the table. My father still sat in his usual seat, but a new silence existed between us, unnamed. The old closeness didn't disappear overnight. It thinned, like paper folded too many times. In the boardroom, I still left his chair at the head of the table. No one asked me to. It simply belonged there. The 6-month suspension had passed, and he returned to work, but in meetings about finance and compliance, he often chose to sit toward the back. I didn't force him to speak. I didn't try to prove anything further. I once thought I had to choose between family and principle. Now I understand that boundaries are not betrayal. Boundaries are how I kept both, even if neither remained intact the way they once were. I'm not proud of what happened. I don't frame the voluntary disclosure decision on the wall, but every night when I turn off the lights in my office, I sleep peacefully. Not because I won, but because I stopped pretending I didn't see. Love does not exempt us from responsibility, and responsibility is not always gentle. If you're listening to this story, remember, this is a fictional story inspired by real-life situations, created with the assistance of AI and edited by humans to offer reflection and emotion. Nothing in this video is meant to encourage you to take similar actions. The storyteller simply believes that sometimes protecting what is right comes at a cost, and if there is a small gift in this, it may be this. Don't sign what you don't understand, and don't stay silent when you know something is wrong. And you? Where are you listening from? A quiet kitchen in Texas, a living room in Ohio, or somewhere you once swallowed your words to keep the peace? If you've ever stood between family and principle, leave a comment. Thank you for staying until the very end. If this story touched you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss other stories. Every view and every share helps conversations like this continue, and that means more than you might think.